Welcome to Human or Athlete, another episode, another week. Super excited to bring on Pedro Monteiro, a coach we've worked with on numerous occasions and spent probably a good 6 months with, working pretty much day in, day out. So, super coach, good friend as well, and yeah, happy to have you on it.
Yeah, big pleasure for me to be speaking to you.
Brilliant. Well, for the people that kind of don't know and don't know your story and don't know who you are, would you mind kind of giving us a brief kind of run through of your career, because I know you played and then coaching and how that's all panned out.
Yeah, so in terms of like playing, wasn't necessarily a big success in career. Tried to play a little bit with Chorley in their like reserves or under 18s at the time, then try my hand at Northwest Counties, but nothing really massive. I enjoyed playing. I always knew that I was probably going to be more successful and better with the coaching side than I was with the playing side. And I got quite interested in coaching quite early. So probably when I was about 18, 19, sort of already knew that's something that I wanted to try. And then I just went straight into it really. So just took over a little grassroots team, little under 10s team at the time, which really enjoyed. I was still playing a bit at the time as well, which was good. Then I went back to Chorley, so did their under 18s. I was like one of the coaches and assistant coach there. Then I worked Accrington in their academy, and I work at Fleetwood in their academy. Spent a little bit of time at Manchester City doing like the really young ones, and then my full times where I met you was Manchester International Football Academy, being the academy manager there. So that's just
Brilliant. How important throughout this whole journey as a coach and everything, and from just your perspective, even on life, how important has the mental side to all of that been? Just kind of observing it and playing.
there's obviously lots of different assets to it. So if I start in terms of if I
Mm-hmm.
look at the different stages of where I've been in terms of coaching and the journey that I'm still on now, it's and will always be for the rest of my life. It's all a journey. It's very interesting to see the changes, and you look back at certain clubs or certain periods in your life where you have certain points of view, and then how your experiences, your conversations, people you meet, and that how that all changes your perspective on your mentality on your life, etc. I think a big thing for me was definitely finding and identifying my own identity. I think was one of the ways that I'd put it. Where it is how I'd put it is finding my own identity, and that's something that I'm still finding, and
Mm-hmm.
it's quite an interesting thing for me in terms of I like, for example, I really admire people who are just unapologetically themselves. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just absolutely brilliant that they are the same no matter who they are with, because
Mm-hmm.
I find that really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause me personally, and football in itself can
Mm-hmm.
sort of tailor to that in a sense where sometimes you obviously have to speak to people in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those people have their really strong sense
Mm-hmm.
of self is something quite interesting, and that's sort of a journey that I've been on,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm still going on to sort of find and really define that self identity. And to look at the mental side of things, so in within that as well is confidence to be your own person. I mean, that's something I'm not sure you're always given or you're
Mm-hmm.
necessarily born with. I think your environment definitely has a place in it. It definitely has a place in how confident you are as a person. That is something that I have struggled with. I think everyone struggles with dips in it. There's probably a moment where I thought that it sort of just happens to me. Or, like, example, I used to get really nervous for sessions. Lots of sessions where, especially when I was younger, maybe not so much now. When I was younger, where I just wouldn't want to get out of the car. I'd just be like, be so worked up on the details, on this, on that, and
Mm-hmm.
there's lots in your head, and you just be like, don't want to do it. But then you sort of take a breath, if you do some breathing, sort of relax, and then sort of just be like,
Mm-hmm.
right, let's just take it step by step and see it for what it is. Because at the end of the day, it's just a session. Like, the world's a lot worse things happening in the world, isn't it? So, yeah, I'm not sure if I've answered your question really, because
No, no, it's
because
well, it's well.
it's quite yeah, it's like I
Right.
say, in terms of where you are on your journey, you're in different mind frames, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect answer. I think authenticity I always kind of thought was awareness mixed with courage. Um, because you've got to be obviously like aware of the environments, and I think you also have a big kind of you control a lot of what your environment is. I always kind of like, it was a big thing because it's like, you're the sixth person of the five people you're around. If you're around five hard workers, you're the sixth. If you're around five lazy people, you're the sixth. And so it was always like, okay, but there is this element of like that's how it works. Like in the people you're around, all these things that rubs off on you naturally. It's as social beings, that's how it works. So the trick is to know that, okay, I'm probably gonna get affected in small ways, like, regardless of how strong I am, like authentically. But as long as I control what my environment is, then no matter what happens in it is gonna hopefully obviously gonna be positive with lessons.
No, that's true. I mean, I agree with that statement with you become sort of the five closest people around you. I agree with that, and I disagree with that because like I said, I do think if someone has I think it goes down to your feelings. So most people do what they want to do, or what benefits them in a sense. So, example, if I'm a hard worker, I wake up early. I'd wake up early and be a hard worker. I think if I was surrounded by lazy people, because I think that's just sort of within me. Obviously, there might be a time where that might change, but I think if people have a strong, there's certain parts of their life that are really strong and really they can identify with a lot, so they really know themselves in certain areas of their life. So I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure if being around different people would change it.
Where would you say your hard working's come from then?
Um, yeah, it's one of those things. I think it's something I've learned. I don't think it's necessarily so, because I think when you're young, I don't think you necessarily know what hard work is. I think you're just sort of quite curious about life and about a certain aspect of life. Whereas you can have those examples, which of course you can, but I don't necessarily think it's. I think it's something that you learn. I think it's something that you sort of develop within yourself, and then, but even without hard work, this is where I have this question of hard work in general, because what is it? It's like a buzzword that we all use, hard work, but what is it? Not just being really curious about something and want to really push it and see where you go with it. So I know a lot of people talk about like love of the game or love of this, which I agree with, but I think there's lots of people in the world who love it. But is it not then the curiosity of that thing? So example, if I'm really curious about science, I'm going to really try and study that theory, study this, study that, and really try and go into the depths of it. And yes, of course you love it, but I think it's the curiosity and the inspiration that then brings out the hard work, so to speak. So example, you're really curious about football and obsessed with football in a sense. So for me, if I look at the coaching practice, I want to become really good at that. And if I'm really curious about the different, then you sort of segment it in a way, and you then really look a bit deeper on each subject, and then really try and be curious. And then some people say that's hard work, but then for you, I don't. It doesn't always necessarily feel like hard work, because it's just you're being curious about something.
No, that's such a cool perspective. I love that. So it's kind of like that maintaining that childlike curiosity, and through that, it's a kind of it's kind of that naturally forms its love, that naturally gives you the like you're so present in that because of that curiosity, that it's like, how far can I take this? And then, like you said, the growth takes care of itself. You get better naturally because you're present when you do it, and then you get all the outcomes on the end. With that, in football especially, there is so much like identification with the outcome, with the 3 points, with the the statistics of football, of how many goals have you scored, have we won? What kind of what's your opinion on that, and is that right? Is that something? How do you kind of deal with that yourself in coaching?
Yeah. Well, It's a bit different for me in a sense because I'm not necessarily in that first team environment, so I don't have to deal with that in a sense. I understand it from that perspective that that is the game. That's what people pay for. That's what people come for. I think being focused on that side, I think if people are just focused on that, you don't tend to do very well.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need a lot of meat on the bones, and I think it's more about the process and more about one thing that I've sort of come to realize a little bit is you just need to be super present in every single moment that you have, because what else do you have in life? You have nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
You can plan, you can think, of course you can, but you have to be really present in the moment and really just enjoy the moment, because anything could happen to anyone at any time with that you have absolutely zero control over. So what is the point in getting stressed about it? It's that conversation then with people and purpose. What is the purpose? If you really strip everything back, and if you strip everything back and you just go for the pure scientific terms, there is no purpose. What is the purpose? The only thing that we have is the moment, is the time right now, and that's the only thing that you can control. So whether you're planning a session, whether you're speaking to your mum, your dad, whoever, that's the only thing you have at that time. So that's where you need to give the full focus. It's the same in terms of the players. I'm sure, of course, they'll think about the games and think about that, but if they don't think about what they're doing now, that is so far away from them. There's not even any point thinking about it. We've known lots of boys when you were with us, and lots of boys always say, I want to be a player, I want to be a player, I want to be a player, but they don't work backwards from it. So you want to be a player, so what do you need to do in order to get there? And then it all comes back to, right, what are you doing right now to do that? Are you recovering? Are you eating rubbish? Are you training properly? Are you researching? Are you being curious about it? Whereas I think if you sort of strip the ego off it and you're just curious about that thing, then that's where I think the hard work comes from. That's the hard work, and that's where you just enjoy the process, because the success for you isn't the end result. The success is the everyday. It's the being in that environment every day, training, hard work. And I think there's a famous quote from Kobe Bryant who says something quite similar. And I think that is the success, because there's going to be a moment in your life where you can't do it anymore. And yes, the results are great, but I'm pretty sure most players will miss being with their teammates, enjoying training every day. That's what they miss.
Yeah.
You have those memories of the great moments, the great games, etc., but you miss the day to day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, it's very profound and wise. I like it. I think it's very interesting to look at that kind of whole present moment thing, because, like you said, when you're fully focused, you're fully present. Okay, now's the time to train. You give it everything, and you get the maximum. Like you said, you get the maximum out of that session, and then you go home. And like, if you've got side hustles or you're just resting, you then focus on that individually, one by one, and you can get so much more done out of the resting. You can get, your body can actually relax if you switch off. All these different things. You're getting so much more out of them just by taking a little bit more of mental energy to actually sit and focus within them.
No, I agree. I think it's harder than ever now, though, especially for young people with social media and all these other distractions. And I think phones in general play a big part of that, because I know now people build businesses on it, and it's a way to connect and everything. I understand the reasoning behind it, and listen, we all use it, so obviously we understand. It's not saying not to use it; it's just finding the balance, which I think is dead important for anything. Is finding that balance. So. But how many boys of 16, 17, younger, who want to be players, sort of are restricted with their phones, are restricted with that time on social media?
Yeah.
Lots of boys who I've come across spend a lot of time on their phones all the time. They'll sit in a room, they don't speak to each other, they're just on their phones.
Yeah.
The same in change rooms. They'll just maybe stay in their little groups, speak, but then a lot of the time they're just on their phones. And I think if you take that away, and you take the phone away, even for certain moments of the day. So I think that's why training and going out to play is sort of like, for me, example, when people speak about getting in the zone, they don't think about anything else. I don't really get that often. The only time I get that is when I'm coaching and when I'm just thinking of that, or if I'm running, or when I was playing, if you're playing. And I think that's why then people sort of have that love for those things, because it is those, like, it's just a release from everything. Bang, let's just get away from everything. And then, especially when you're running, well, I ran a marathon a couple of years ago now, and just the zone you'd get in where the miles are passing and you're not really it's like when you meditate and you meditate well, the sort of ideas come into your head, you sort of just allow them, and then you just let them drift, and then another one comes in, and it's such a, I mean, if anyone wants to run a marathon, I'm advertising it pretty well, because it's something you don't really get anywhere else, or I've found that you don't really get anywhere else, because like, I've never been in that situation where those thoughts have just gone so freely, and I've not really sort of focused on one, or I focused on one for a bit and then it's sort of gone. It's just been like effortless, really. And if you can get into that state and that curiosity and of something, because obviously, listen, it's not going to happen the first time that you run, but if you keep at it and you keep going, like anything, I think it's a really good it's a good place to get to, and it sort of helps you then just to be clear and have that clarity, and then you can just go into your day. So having sort of focus now for kids, I think it's really difficult. I think it's really difficult, and I think it's the environment. I think because a lot of kids now, like even from when I grew up, I mean, I'm only young myself, so I'm not exactly old, and it's just so different. Like I mean, when I was 16, probably, like Facebook and Twitter and everything came on, and just the change. It's like now you're seeing kids who are like 13, 14, 15, 16 who've had it like basically since they were very young, and that's all they know. Like it's really, like the idea of them picking up a book is just like unheard of. Or just, like, let's take your phone off you, actually have a chat. And they are interesting people. They're super interesting people, and they're profound in what they think about, and they're really good points of view and really interesting views on the world. But you just think, like, are we missing out as a world, as a society, on that creativity by them having their phones? I mean, there's an argument for and against, because there's lots of innovation with the technology and everything, which I understand, but then there's also maybe different parts that we're not maybe not utilizing as well. I'm not too sure on the answer, but I do just think that is an issue in terms of boys, really, and girls, and anyone who plays or participates in anything, to really get focused and stay focused and curious and concentrated for a long time.
Yeah, I think I read the book on flow and who defined it as flow and stuff like that, and that was basically saying the more flow you have in life, the better, like the happier you are. And it, like, I think that's such a thing to remember as well, because it's like the more times you're sitting down, whether it's football, whether it's another sport, whether it's just a hobby, and you're sitting down and you're learning to get better at something, because it's like, I can't remember the scale, but it's like it's finding the balance between get like the difficulty level but also your ability, and like finding the sweet spot where it's just out of your reach but you could kind of work towards it. And that flow is just like such a key part. And if you think, like you exactly just said, the technology and everything distracting from whatever is taking away so much flow in our life. And I think Simon Sinek once said, he said, the like, because of all this technology, because of all this impatience, because of all this distraction, we are just a generation that, unless we improve our awareness and we like kind of, work on these environments, as like the older generations do, that we go into, the world's just kind of going to pass us by until we take those steps. And then you think of, like, on football and stuff like that, and it just takes, like, again, this is why the podcast is here, is because you have this brilliant 2-3 hours, and firstly, I don't think people understand how like amazing that is to do that every day, let alone everything that comes with being a footballer. But like that, just being able to do that every day and knowing that from young, for me, I don't want to sit in an office and work. Like, I want to be out and doing that. And even in lockdown, when that happened, I think a lot of people have realized like how much that was such a key part of their life and their happiness, just about training every day. And I think, with everything that's going on, I also think that like lose what necessarily even after football, and you've got your home at 1, 2, 3 every day, and this is what it's about. Is there's also another 7, 8, 9 hours of your life every single day that you can do something with. You can have more flow. You can socialize in different ways, and that doesn't have to be spent watching Netflix or on your phone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's I think what well, it is what you're trying to do, isn't it? Is it's make an impact, do something, be productive in that time. And it's no, I agree with you. I think finding that flow, and I think it's difficult. I think being in the present moment constantly, or being aware of it, is difficult. I've been I've been watching and reading a couple of things on Leonardo da Vinci, and it's really quite interesting because there's a guy who's written a book. I'm about to buy it, and he's called Walter Isaacson. And I watched his interview based on the book, and he was saying he was walking through Central Park, I think, to go somewhere, and he said he just sort of went back and thought in the mind of Da Vinci, and he thought he just took a lot longer walking through the park and actually noticing everything.
Yeah.
Which, and Da Vinci, this is what I go back to curiosity. He was just curious about everything, wanted to know how that worked, and it's so. I think that is what brings success, because the best players in the world, or the best anything in the world at any level, they go into the details of it, and you can't go into the real small details of it if you don't have that curiosity about it. Because you can love it, but I have lots of friends who love football, but they're not necessarily that bothered about the details of how to receive, as an example. So I think it's just for me anyway. I resonate more with that than I do with just love of the game.
Yeah, I think it's such a cool perspective, because I've recently been, talking a lot about that kind of love for it. And if you are in that present moment and you're enjoying what you do, regardless of the environment, regardless of what's happened, like the comparison of other players, the difficulty, however you're doing, playing or whatever, then all you can do is be happy and enjoy that. And then from there comes improvement. But to think about that curiosity, as that's what drives that love, because that's what makes it like, it's that stepping stone into the present moment. Like, okay, how do I figure this out? Like, how do I figure out how to break this defense down? Or how do I figure out what am I doing wrong in this? Like, why have I given it away twice? Okay, how do I figure this out? And it's like a key, like an open door, or the key to the lock of that into the present moment with that. And I think it's such a, I didn't think about it like that in a way. And I love it. It's very clever and full of curiosity. In kind of in football and all these different things, what do you look for in players and even like other coaches, that kind of like in terms of their values and the way they have their perspective? I'm guessing curiosity is going to be up there.
It's quite interesting, really, because before that, I think it's very important to understand the individual, because everyone comes from a completely different background, different life, different area. So it's quite difficult, really. I think I'm yet to come across a player, I think, who has a real curiosity of the game, in a sense where you're probably the closest, in a sense where you're really breaking down the details and you want to sort of go more into it. I've had a couple, but they're a bit younger, so it's not to say that they won't be there. So I've had a couple who were quite close to that, and who have gone on and who are doing quite well. So that's definitely one of it. And if I look back at you and those players, they're the ones who've gone on to do the best, essentially, because they are bothered about things that most people think, oh, that's not that important, it's only a tiny detail, that you're bothered about. And they're bothered about as well. And it's that's definitely one thing that I'll look for in a player. But I think it's interesting because I'm not in recruitment, so I'm not recruiting the players. My job's to develop the players, so I sort of accept the players for how they are, and then I have to try and mold them and try and shape them. So I'm not looking for this player or that player.
But like in terms of what do you value then in the players that you have, if that's like more appropriate?
So I value openness, so that growth mindset, to want to improve, to be humble enough to say, you know what, that really wasn't great, I need to get better at this. So that strive really just for constant improvement. I like hardworking players, but also then goes that conversation, are they just curious, or they just love the game? And I like players who are brave, and brave can be interpreted in different ways, I think. But I'm finding with those different interpretations, but brave on the ball, brave in how they play, brave in how they can be confident in themselves to just be themselves. And I like that a lot. I think that's something that I like a lot, in the sense where you're just yourself. I'm happy being myself no matter who I'm with. Example, if a young player is going to play with older players and he just goes, I'm just going to still do the same things, I'm not going to adjust for them, I'm just going to be me. And that's really hard to, especially when you're young, especially now, it's really hard to get people to understand that, having them their self-identity in a sense.
Yeah, I do think, like, for me as well, it's taken time to come to that, realization. I think, and even kind of Craig Tanner, who was on the podcast before, was saying that, when you go and train with the older ones or whatever, and you treat every day, and this was his perspective, and it was a really cool one as well. It's like every single day, it's just like a kickabout with your mates. And the way you approach that is so relaxed, so comfortable in who you are, because your friends know exactly who you are, all these different things. So comfortable to try whatever. And if you take every session, whether with the first team, whether with the under 18s, whatever, and you take it like that, then you've kind of got nothing to lose and nothing to like, and I kind of come back to that, and that's what I was going to come on to next, was that kind of love versus fear approach. And there's so many different ways to take it, like, the amount of spins on loving what you do and then going to kind of using the fear as a good thing. Kind of what would your opinion be on love and fear? And
it's
words.
No, it's something that's probably changed. I mean, I think I used to think that I was quite scared of not being good or not being good enough, so that's why I worked hard. But more recently, I've found that doesn't really, for me anyway, I'm not saying it's for everyone, but for me, it doesn't really sit with me as much as just finding out about, right, what's the example at the minute. I'm really looking into my communication. So how do I really speak to players? What words am I saying? How am I saying them? And that, let's delve into that a little bit, and let's see where we can go with that. And that's sort of having that passion for coaching and for improving. It's not even coaching, teaching. It's the same thing. You're trying to improve a person. You're trying to help a person. You're trying to guide them, is whether they're footballers or whether they just want to go to university or just get a part-time job. Or just get a job. They've never had a job. For some people, that's an unbelievable achievement. Doesn't matter whether they're going to sign a professional contract or not. At the end of the day, you're just trying to help them. And I'm under the belief now as well that I think lots of things transfer in lots of different walks of life. So especially at like a high level, but especially if you do things well, I think you can take things from a businessman, you can take things from a salesman, you can take things from a dancer. And I think all those sort of skills and habits that they have as individuals help take them forward. And I think that's transferable to football. So, sorry, I went off on a tangent. To get back to the question, so I think fear. I think you have to be careful with fear, because I think fear, if you're not careful, it can take over you a little bit. I understand, and I've watched The Last Dance, where Michael Jordan sort of speaks about the fear side of it and how that sort of motivates him, or he used something external to motivate him. But what sort of gets me with him as well is his dedication, his mentality to just. I mean, his mentality was like a rocket in terms of his self-confidence, but he got that through how prepared he was. He was just training more than everyone else, and I don't think you can be top. Like Kobe Bryant's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, when he died, I watched lots of videos, and I watched them before that as well. But just the detail that he'd go into in terms of basketball, and those guys would go into, and it just takes me back to curiosity, where it is just that level of detail that other people aren't willing to get to. Whereas if you have the fear, are you worried about that? Or you're worried about other things that take your mind off that curiosity, in a sense.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, and I think comes out the thing with Michael Jordan as well, for the motivation. Motivation's short term. Motivation isn't long term. Being inspired by someone's long term. Examples: lots of people, older people, who watch Maradona for the first time, that inspired them to love football.
Yeah.
It's not. You can watch the videos and everything, but it's all short term.
Yeah.
I understand he's probably needed to give himself that motivation to then really be at his best, which I get, or he sort of got into his head, oh, he thinks he's better than me, I want to be the best. And I think he probably went down to that competition with his brother when he was very young, where he'd have like ridiculous competitions with his brother, and I'm sure that, and his father, his acceptance for his father, that's that deeper emotional connection to something. And that's with players as well, and there's that nature versus nurture conversation and debate. And I think I'm a big believer in nurture, because I think if the environment, Usain Bolt, if he wasn't born where he was born, or maybe in the same family, if he was born in a different part of Jamaica, would he have been as good as he was? You don't know. If Ronaldo wasn't born in a poorer part of Madeira in Portugal, where he could just play all the time, and he didn't necessarily have all these different complications, would he have been as good as he was? I don't think so. But then I also think you have something within you, or something happens. I don't know the answer to this really, and I'm actually quite happy that I don't know the answer to this, because it's quite interesting to keep talking about. Where he just had that love for the game, and just the curiosity to just work, and just trying to be better at this game that we all love. And I think it's just so interesting, because no one will ever know the answer, because it's not, because you can have two people who are born in the same place who are completely different people. It's like when you have I have a son now, and I don't have another son, not yet, or I don't think I'm gonna have another one, I'm not sure. But people who have more than one child, they're in the same environment, they're completely different people. So it's interesting. It's interesting. It's not one or the other, I don't think. I think there's meet somewhere in the middle. But I am really interested in the environment and the nurture side of it, because how do you create the curiosity? How do you get them to really love the game? How do you get them to not be fearful of giving the ball away, as an example, when the kids but you can't control everything. So, like, from my perspective, I can't control everything. I can have an impact on someone, but it's only a very, very small impact, because I might be with them for 2 hours a day, or 3 hours a day, or whatever. I'm not with them for the whole time. So, but if I can in those hours give them something, or get them to do something, or get them to try something that opens their mind up, and then maybe not initially they'll think, oh, that was great, or in fact initially they might think, that's what's he talking about, it's a load of rubbish. But later on, that's when they might go back, like, you know what, that thing you did was amazing, or that really helped me, that made me understand a little bit more. I didn't get it at the time, but I get it now. And that's really what you're looking for. And I think coaching is really difficult, because you have no idea if you're doing a good job. Initially, you don't know, unless in a few years you'll know, when they're good people. They want to do well in their lives. They want to be more than footballers, and and they're doing well. And even if they're not doing well, you hope you've given them the mechanisms to deal with it, which I think is important.
Someone, I can't remember where I read it, but someone said I can't give any lessons or any teachings or coachings to anyone. All I can
Yeah,
do is give pointers,
exactly.
and
No,
that always.
that's it. No, but that's like any research study. That there's it's just dependent, I suppose. So especially depends on the research. There's lots of variables, etc. Nothing's ever fact because there's going to be a time in however many years' time where that fact might be disproven and it's different. So
Yeah.
you live a different reality then. So I think getting people to question why, I think, is probably one of the best things that's happened in like the last 20 years or 30 years or whatever, because definitely a time when coaches were taking players, they just said, do what I say, just do it, get on with it. Whereas now, let's like, you want players to ask why. You want
Hmm.
players to be like, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this? It's not them being, he's got a bad attitude or he's cheeky. It's no, he just wants to understand.
Yeah.
Help him understand. And it's like my son. I want my son to ask why.
Hmm.
Question things. Don't just say, oh, that's how we do it. That's how it's always done. That's no. Why? Why do we do it like that? Is there a better way to do it? What's the reasoning behind it? That's great for him, but does that work for him? I've come to find out not lots of people like having that conversation because it can take quite a long time and sometimes it's a little bit uncomfortable. So, but I think that's especially for any children. I'm sure lots of athletes like yourself now are very intelligent people, so they do ask those questions, which I think's definitely the way to keep going.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly interesting, and I think breaking things down to understand them like
Mm,
in the way you want to understand them, whether it's obviously you have all your different audio, visual, kinetic learners, but I think also like to know something is to have experienced it and to have kind of been in that moment and tried it or learned that lesson or
mm,
all these things. But then, like you said, not everything that you hear or fact or whatever is something like you might know the fact and be able to repeat that, but do you know because of experience? Is that real like understanding of what that is? And it's
yeah,
I think that's a big difference is that if all I know and all I can kind of look at and go, okay, I understand this, or I could give you a pointing on this, is that which I've experienced. And so, working on different skills
mm,
on the pitch or even off the pitch with other people,
yeah,
all I can kind of understand and talk about and even, just like, kind of witness and try and like understand if I don't, is that which I'm experiencing in that moment. And so then it comes right back down to the present moment. It comes back to that curiosity, like you said, and and then from all the experiences you've had
mm,
in your lifetime, what's your perspective going to be on that? And
exactly.
then that comes all together.
But I think you've got to connect it. So I agree with you. Into lots of people segment things to break it down because it's quite
Hmm.
complicated.
Hmm.
That's just how it works. Um, which I understand, but oh, sorry, but what I don't understand is when they have when they don't link them together, and it's like take your day as a footballer. I'm pretty sure your day, your session will be different if you wake up at 7 o'clock to if you woke up and had a bad night's sleep and you woke up at 4. What I'm trying to get at is everything's connected. So it's not
Hmm.
one thing or session, that's it. It's no, the whole day, everything in your life is everything in the world's connected. And you've got to, yes, you can break things up. But that's just for us. That's not how the world works.
Yeah.
The world isn't broken up. Everything's together.
Hmm.
Everything's all together. Everything's all connected. It's not in segments.
Hmm. It's
We
just kind
break,
of a flow.
yeah, it's like the game of football. We break it up into in possession, out possession, transition, blah blah blah, whatever. It's all in it. It's all
Hmm.
together. We break it up so it's easier. But if you break it up, not just talking about football, but anything in life, um if you if you break everything up, but without connecting the dots and seeing right, well, it's like um it's like the gears on a watch.
Hmm.
So if one stops working, everything stops working. It doesn't. Everything influences the next thing,
Yeah.
which I think something that is interesting to sort of look at, and it's interesting to. I'm not necessarily sure how that fits in coaching or in football, but I think it's
No,
interesting
it's.
to have that awareness that everything's together, and
I think
everything
it
will always be together.
I think it
Everything's
has a
always
massive
connected.
impact on football because it then decides how you go into training. It decides how you
Mm,
leave training and all these things. I mean, 100%. It's when in difficult training days, which are like difficult environments, or you don't play well, or one of these things, it
yeah,
takes a lot of energy out of you for the rest of the day.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
then it's okay. How do I manage this? How do I cope with this? How do I, whatever? And if you have a bad training session, it's then having the awareness, like you said, to then kind of
Why?
disrupt the flow
Mm,
of is this going to take it away? But like you said, if you have a bad night's sleep and you go in the morning and your training session is going to be seen in a completely different way by you
yeah,
for that session and then potentially affect the rest of your day. So
yeah,
if you're getting any, like, if you're having a good breakfast, if you're doing all the right things that that feel good for you, that feel good for you, whatever anyone says, and follow them, then you're going to be a lot more kind of, I'd say, aware of that flow and be able to kind of deal with it if it doesn't, if it gets disrupted slightly or all these things. But like you said, I think it's all connected. So, and then it's about the awareness and the research and the curiosity to piece them together and kind of like take control of certain aspects that some people wouldn't want to because or they aren't aware that exist. And by doing that, you can then you know I think the thing it all comes down to is then when in that response to any situation, whether it's great, whether it's bad, that attitude is the freedom that we have in
mm,
any situation, in football, off the
yeah,
pitch, whatever. That freedom in that space before stimulus and response, and in that space before you respond, that's when all the things that are connected, all the things that have made you who you are, all the perspectives you could have in that situation, that's where you have the freedom to then have your
yeah,
attitude and react in however you want. And then that all builds into it together.
yeah,
And in every moment, that's how it goes. Like,
yeah,
so, and then that builds the person, builds whatever you want to create
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I think we got pretty deep. It's great. I would
yeah.
another question. Another
Bit
question would
heavy.
be kind of. I have
Yeah,
always kind of seen your generosity, your
mm,
quick ability to give and to want to give and to feel compassion and to understand people. Kind of how important is that for you? And you
yeah.
know, is there enough of that in football as well?
Um, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for me, the I think there is. I think I've met some really good people in football who want to give and want to help. And at the end of the day, coaching, that's your job. Um, and yeah, for me, I'm not saying it by any stretch of imagination, but I just want to see people doing well.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see the boys that I look after, or whoever I'm looking after at the time. I want to see them doing well and invest my time in them doing that. And there's obviously different ways of doing that. Um, I think football's very ego based. I think it's very ego based, and I think if you take the ego out of it, I think then that's where it becomes quite interesting, because that's when you start to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the ego's there, people are defending their ideas that maybe they're not too convinced on anyway, but
Mm-hmm.
they just think, oh, I need to get
Yeah.
a good idea out. Or usually what I found as well is I read a book called Quiet by Susan Cain. It was
Mm-hmm.
quite interesting on introverts and extroverts,
Yeah.
and sort of like a silent leadership in a sense. But what I find as well, lots. I mean, football essentially is an extra. I mean, I would not consider myself an extrovert, although I'd spend most of my day speaking in front of a
Mm-hmm.
pretty large group of people. But I mean, in the book anyway, it defines it quite well. We're all little bits of both anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and it's quite interesting in a sense, because lots of people who are extroverts and tend to talk and hold the room really well, they're not always the ones who think about it quite deeply, and but
Mm-hmm.
they maybe show it off better than others do, or they explain it better than others do. I'm trying to work at that's not something that comes naturally to me, um, which is fine. It's just who I am. Um, but if you, it's interesting, because in football, I think you only see snippets of people. You don't see all of them. you only see what they're like at the training. Unless you have a really good relationship with them and you sort of see them at home, you don't see the full person. You only see a small portion of the person. So people could be completely different on the pitch to, or on the coach in a coaching session, to how they then are in at home, or which you'd expect anyway. There's very few people, I think, who are the same in all walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think in terms of caring, I think if you have the best idea and the best interest of the person, and you take the ego out of it, whereas, oh, I want to see him become or I got him into the club, he's gonna, all that rubbish. If you take all that out of it and you just focus on developing the person, you focus on, this is what my point with introverts, where I think if you listen to everyone's opinion, even the ones who are quiet, or even the ones who maybe don't speak as much, or the ones who struggle maybe to communicate, then help them to communicate. Um, then that's when I think you get ideas. I just worry sometimes in football that I'm not necessarily speaking. Well, I'm speaking from some experience, so I don't have to go into specifics. But um, I just worry a little bit. People sort of do things on opinion too much.
Mm-hmm.
They do things on opinion too much, and they do things on. This is what I mean, taking the ego out of it. Because if everyone feels confident and comfortable to have their own opinion, no matter how loud of a voice they have or they don't, and you really listen to the ideas, and you all are very clear in where you want to go, then I think that's when everything becomes better, and that's when I think you can really care and give example, like where at MIFA, it's quite a clear statement that we want to move forwards together. So that tells us exactly how we need to act. We need to move people forwards. Anyone who wants to be there, whether you want to go and sign a pro contract or you want to just come and play football and go to university after, they're all there for the same reason. The levels can be different, it can be varying, and they often are. But that's a very clear way of working. Look, there is places that they think they have a clear way of working, but they actually don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the mess starts to happen, because he's working that way, you're working that way. You don't speak, I'll sort this out. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely doesn't work. Whereas if you have that clarity of, this is who we are, this is what we are, this is what we do, and whoever comes, no matter the situation, as long as they fit into that, can fit it in with us. Um, I think that's sort of a formula then to help you to care and to give to others, and to move people forward, which
Yep.
is essentially, I'm not giving them anything per se, but we're just giving of our time and our attention.
Yeah, 100%. I'd say there was someone, I think I heard something of one of the philosophers that said, those who talk the loudest have nothing to say, but
Yeah,
those who talk the
it's
quietest
so
always have
true.
something interesting to
Yeah,
say.
it's so true.
And in terms of that kind of little bit of introvert, a little bit of extrovert, I was reading this creativity book, and it was saying how because of the lack of ego, like exactly how you just described, is that the ability to flick between characteristics. So
Mm,
the ability to go from being incredibly introverted to then learn to be incredibly extroverted, and being able to switch. The ability to be incredibly smart but not naive,
yeah,
but also naive, and to be hardworking, but then when you rest, you rest. And so it
yeah,
was all these different kind of polarizing traits, and the what they worked out was successful people could have both and could be
yeah,
able to switch depending on the environment. And that comes down to awareness and presence, but it also kind of says to me, it's like, that ability to learn what you don't know, and then also to kind of like, with that, you're never locking yourself into a box. You're
mm,
never saying I'm smart
I'm
or
this,
I'm an
I'm that. Yeah,
introvert or whatever,
yeah,
because then you're so open in that ego to however that environment can be, and whatever you want to be in that moment. Okay, like I've got something interesting to say, or in this moment I actually need to rest and recuperate,
yeah,
or it's not me being lazy or whatever, but I need to rest. But at the
yeah,
same time, then another situation comes up and you go, actually, this is one where I need to take control and work super hard in this moment
yeah,
to get the best out of this. So that's a really interesting kind of thought process that just kind of blew me away. That ability to be aware
To
of all that.
switch, yeah. It's interesting because I think that's something that comes with time as well. Because when I first started coaching, you sort of get so lost in it, and then you get too lost in it because you
Yeah.
don't have the switch, and
Yeah.
it's really important then to find the balance. I mean, having a son's probably given me the balance because I go home, I'm with him, and
Yeah.
I can't always watch the football. I have to watch whatever's on. So it sort of gives you that balance, and sort of makes you just feel refreshed. I think that's where these motivational videos sometimes, and I know lots of players watch them. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, but I think you can then sometimes get into the trap unless you're aware of this, where you have to segregate it, where it's like just work, just work, just work, just work. And it's not life.
No.
It's not life. You need to. Even best players in the world, they rest. They have the time with the kids. Might have the odd little glass of wine or whatever. It just happens. Whereas people are like, oh no, surely they don't do that. They just work all the time. They do work ridiculously hard when they work. But then it's also the quality. And we're talking about quality. Lots of coaching. Lots of coaches talk about quality of experience. Whereas if you have the quality of work and you have the quality of, it's not just working hard for 100 hours. It's can you work really well and really specific example. Someone could get fit, but they just go on, or someone could say they're getting fit and they just go on the same pace run every day. They do it every day. They do it for an hour. Consistent, yeah, great. They're determined to get out, brilliant, but they're not necessarily pushing themselves. So they're not seeing those improvements. What would you rather have? Let's train twice a week or 3 times a week, but let's really go at it. And you know what? Let's just reduce the time that we run.
Yeah.
Then you start seeing those improvements. And I think it's the same with any form of life. It's not. There's a good book that's out. I've got it, but I've not read it yet. But it's called Deep Work.
Yeah. Cal Newport.
Yeah. So it's based. Have you read it?
I've only listened to parts of it, but I've got his other one which he talks about on deep work a
Yeah.
lot.
So my understanding of it is basically finding your time where you can work the best and where you can sort of be the most productive. And I think once you find that, because everyone has dips. Like example, after a session, probably just after lunch, I have a dip. So anything that I really need to focus on is quite difficult for me.
Yeah.
But in the morning between maybe 6 and 9, I'm pretty on it. And then maybe a bit later on, I'm pretty on it, so I can really focus. But it's also having that time to understand what do you need to get to that. So, example, if like, I'm working at a club as well as my full-time job, so if I'm driving there, I know probably had a pretty busy day, pretty hectic, so my journey there or what I listen to might change depending on how I feel. But it'll usually be something it might be related to football. Usually my journey home has nothing to do with football. It might be music. I might listen to a podcast that's completely different
Yeah.
just to get away from it. And I think I think the older you get, you learn that a little bit more. Whereas I remember when I was young and trying to play to the highest level that I could play, I was very much let's train all the time. Let's listen to these motivational videos and let's just be at it all the time. And you see the effects, but it's very difficult then to maintain.
Yeah, I think and that's problem with, I'd say something with our society is that it's about doing more, doing more, doing more. And don't get me wrong, I loved those motivational videos growing up, and they're still a great tool sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's come to a stage where literally it is, and that's just the whole thing that debunked the 10,000 hour rule in Outliers, was it was saying you could work 10,000 hours, not present, not focused, not quality time. And someone could work 6,000 hours of quality, focus, intense, aware time.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a big difference in improvement in growth.
Yeah.
And so I think, it comes down to that the awareness around, am I doing it for me? Am I doing it for actually getting better? Or have I lost myself in ego here and I'm doing it because of the idea of doing more
Mm.
is too much?
But it's like anything. If it can only go to a certain point,
Hmm.
do more, do more, do more. It doesn't always mean bigger is better,
Yeah.
because it's not. So it's the quality of what you do, and it's the way that you do it. It's the passion you have in it
I
to
think
do it.
everyone who goes through that, like, and I've been through that many a time where I've overworked myself and all
Yeah,
these things. And I think, I watch people doing that now. And again,
stressful. So
it,
I had to run a marathon to get over it. It's so stressful.
but I kind of just got to the point where those people are kind of doing it, and I'm just like, you're gonna bang your head on the ceiling when you
Yeah,
do. Like I've been there. I know exactly how it feels. Nothing is gonna change it,
no,
but you gotta go like, and this is another quote, like you gotta go too far to learn the truth sometimes.
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
sometimes you got to do that, and that's just how it goes. That's part of your journey. But it's like I've been there enough times where I'm like, okay, maybe look at this differently and
Yeah,
actually intrinsically go, okay, what am I doing? Like, is this right now for me, my body, all these different things? Is this actually making me better or whatever?
yeah.
And that difference, I think, is just a kind of a part of your journey. You get there, it's a bit of maturity. It's all those kind of things. One bit of advice for kind of any listener, any footballer, any athlete,
Hmm.
that you could kind of give in like one quick kind of way.
Um, hmm. You're, I'd say you're enjoy the journey. That's all you have. Live the moment, live every moment, because you don't get anything else other than that. The only thing you can affect is what you're doing right now. So don't worry about, oh, I want to be a player. Great. What are you doing? But listen, even with that, and if we go into the depths of that, what do you do when you are a player? You want the next thing. All you have is the process,
Mhm.
and it's a bit of a shallow existence that if all you want to do is play football, surely it's like in Arsene Wenger's book. He says when he goes to the pearly gates, it's and someone asks him the question. The man asks him the question. He says, "What did you do?" And I won football matches. And oh, surely you've done something more meaningful than that. And I think that's just such a because football's such a it's a big thing to us, but in the depths of the world, it's just a game, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite a small thing. So, um, but anyone who's lucky enough to have it as a job or to play it or any sport for that or what anything that they do in life that they love, just enjoy every moment, because there's going to be a time where you're not going to have it, and it's gone. So you need to just look forward to just saying, you know what, I had some really good times and I really enjoyed every moment. And don't get too bothered about what they're saying, what the manager's saying, what he's saying. The only thing you can affect is how you are, who you are, what you do every day, what you're doing at that moment. That's the only thing you have control over. So why get stressed and waste energy on anything else?
I love it. And then final question, we kind of ask this in every episode. What makes you more than a footballer, a football coach?
Mm,
What makes you kind of human? And you kind of answered this already.
yeah,
But
yeah. Um, Yeah, I don't really like being defined as a football coach. It's not really.
exactly.
I don't really like that definition. I mean, the only thing I define myself as is in relation to my family. That's how I define myself. But um, yeah, I think I just want to help people.
Hmm.
I just want to help,
Yeah.
whether they're players or not. I just want to try and help and move people forward. And I want to be the best that I can be at doing that. So that's where my curiosity comes from, to then just try and develop that. So listen, I might be speaking to you in 10 years time. I'm not a coach. I might be something else, but those lessons still are still relevant and present in everything. I'm pretty sure I will be a coach or involved in football in 10 years time. But yeah,
I love it. Thank you ever so much for your wise
no, big
words
pleasure.
and the depth that we've gone to. It's been a brilliant conversation.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, big pleasure. Good to see you as always and speak to
Yeah.
you.